On April 2, 2026, the highest office in the land stood before the world and declared a triumphant victory. We were told that Operation Epic Fury had decimated the enemy in just 32 days. We were told that the United States is now producing more oil than anyone else in the history of the world. We were told that we just secured the largest oil reserves on the planet in Venezuela in a matter of minutes. And perhaps the most stunning declaration of all, we were told that we have the greatest economy in history with absolutely zero inflation. Zero. But as you sit there watching this, I want you to ask yourself a very simple, very dangerous question. If we have secured total energy dominance, if we have all this oil, and if inflation is truly dead, why are you still paying $5 for a gallon of gas? Welcome back to Prism News. I am your host, and today we are going to tear down the carefully constructed illusion of the 2026 energy independence narrative. This is not a conversation about military strategy or battlefield tactics. This is a deep dive investigation into the financial gaslighting of the American middle class. What you are witnessing is not a victory dividend. It is a massive, silent wealth transfer happening right under your nose. The headlines want you cheering for overseas dominance, while your wallet is being quietly emptied at the grocery checkout and the local gas station. They tell you the lights are on, but if you look closely at the financial data, nobody is home. Over the next few minutes, we are going to look at the undeniable facts provided by institutions like the Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, and the Wall Street Journal. I am going to show you exactly why owning the largest oil reserves in the world does not mean you get cheap gas, and how the official inflation numbers are being engineered to hide a shadow tax that you are paying every single day. Before we get into the dark reality of the Venezuelan oil paradox in our next segment, I want you to drop a comment below. Did your grocery bill feel like there was zero inflation this week? Let me know, because the truth is about to get much more uncomfortable. Let us unpack the most shocking revelation from that primetime address: the claim that we have taken control of Venezuela and its massive oil reserves. On paper, it sounds like the ultimate economic relief package. Venezuela sits on over 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. It is the holy grail of crude. Logic would tell you that if the United States controls that supply, the American consumer should be swimming in cheap energy. You should be paying $1.50 at the pump. But that is where the grand illusion begins, and where you need to understand how global financial systems actually operate. The United States government does not pump oil. The United States government does not refine oil, and the United States government certainly does not sell gas at your local corner store. When politicians say we have the oil, what they really mean is that multinational energy conglomerates and private financial entities now have access to those fields. These corporations are not charities. They are publicly traded entities whose sole legal obligation is to maximize shareholder value on Wall Street. Once that Venezuelan crude is pumped out of the ground, it enters the global commodity market. It is priced in dollars per barrel on international exchanges. If a buyer in Europe or Asia is willing to pay $90 for a barrel of that crude, the energy companies are not going to sell it to an American refinery for $50 just out of patriotism. They will sell it to the highest bidder globally. Furthermore, the oil from Venezuela is heavy sour crude. Our domestic refineries on the Gulf Coast are actually built to process this specific type of oil, but for years they have been starved of it. Even if that heavy crude flows into Texas and Louisiana, the refined products like diesel and gasoline are still sold at the global market rate. You, the American taxpayer, funded the operation to secure the asset, but you do not get the discount. The profits flow upward to corporate balance sheets and dividend payouts, while you are left holding the bag at the retail pump. This is the ultimate joint venture illusion. The public takes the risk, pays the military cost, and bears the geopolitical burden, while private institutions reap the financial rewards. Stick around, because if you think the situation in South America is a financial trap, wait until you see what the true cost of the Strait of Hormuz is doing to your savings account right now. We have been assured that the enemy navy is gone and their air force is in ruins. We are told that we do not even need the oil from the Middle East anymore. But this is a classic misdirection that ignores the fundamental mechanics of the global supply chain. Let us look at the cold, hard numbers reported by maritime authorities and financial news outlets like Bloomberg. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow choke point where roughly 20% of the world's total oil consumption passes through every single day. It does not matter if the United States is completely energy independent on paper. It does not matter if we never import a single drop of Middle Eastern crude, because oil is a fungible, globally traded commodity. If the supply flowing through Hormuz is threatened, delayed, or disrupted in any way, the global price of oil skyrockets instantly. And here is the financial trap that politicians refuse to explain to the public. Even if an enemy military force is completely neutralized, the mere threat of asymmetric disruption completely alters the insurance markets. Maritime insurance syndicates, like Lloyd's of London, calculate risk using complex algorithms. The moment a region is designated as a high-risk conflict zone, the war risk premiums for commercial oil tankers shoot up by hundreds of percentages. A tanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude might suddenly face an insurance bill of over $1 million just to make the transit. Who do you think pays for that massive spike in shipping costs? The oil companies do not absorb it. They pass every single penny of that risk premium down the supply chain. It gets baked into the wholesale price of gasoline, which then gets slapped onto the final price you pay at the pump. So when a viewer comments and asks if their military is decimated, why are they still a threat in the Strait? The answer is not about battleships. The answer is about finance. It only takes the possibility of a single cheap drone or a crude sea mine to keep maritime insurance rates at catastrophic levels. You are currently paying a geopolitical risk premium every time you fill your tank, regardless of how many victories are declared on the evening news. And as we will see in the next block, the cost of gas is just the beginning of the invisible tax you are being forced to pay. We must now turn our attention to the most carefully guarded secret of modern governance, the true cost of projecting unprecedented power across the globe. We hear about days of overwhelming victories and sophisticated operations like epic fury, but no one on that podium tells you how the bill is being paid. Let us apply some basic macroeconomic logic from the Federal Reserve data. Wars and massive military deployments are not funded solely by the taxes collected from your paycheck. The federal government operates on a massive deficit. When a multi-billion-dollar operation is launched, the Treasury Department issues bonds. Who buys these bonds when foreign nations stop buying them? The Federal Reserve does. And how does the Federal Reserve buy them? They create the currency out of thin air. This mechanism is the very definition of currency debasement. When trillions of new dollars are injected into the financial system to fund defense contracts and overseas logistics, the pool of dollars expands. But the pool of actual goods, services, and resources in the real economy does not expand at the same rate. More dollars chasing the same amount of goods means the purchasing power of every single dollar in your bank account drops. This is what economists call the inflation tax, or the shadow tax. It is the most regressive and devastating tax imaginable because it does not require an act of Congress to pass. It is silently siphoned from your savings, your wages, and your retirement funds. When you see your grocery bill double, when you see a simple fast food meal cost $20, you are not just looking at corporate greed, you are looking at the direct consequence of money printing. You are literally paying for the bombs, the aircraft carriers, and the global logistics network every time you buy a loaf of bread. The government gets to spend the newly printed money first, at its maximum value, while you get the money last, after it has already lost its purchasing power. This is the cantilever effect in full motion. I want to ask you, the viewers of Prism News, a direct question. Do you feel wealthier today than you did 4 years ago? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Because the political elite are about to tell you that you are living in the greatest economy ever, and we are going to tear that lie apart in Block 5. Perhaps the most aggressive psychological operation launched against the American public recently was the flat-out declaration that there is no inflation. This statement requires a breathtaking level of audacity when the average citizen is actively struggling to make ends meet. To understand how officials can stand at a podium and claim zero inflation, we have to look at how the government calculates the Consumer Price Index. The modern calculation of inflation is a masterclass in statistical manipulation. Over the decades, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has repeatedly altered the methodology of the index. They use tricks like substitution. If the price of beef goes up too much, the formula assumes you will just buy cheaper chicken instead, so they swap it out to keep the inflation number looking low. They use hedonic quality adjustments. If a new car costs 10% more but has a slightly better radio, they argue the price did not really go up because you are getting better quality. They strip out food and energy to give you the core inflation number, as if average human beings do not need to eat or drive to work. By the time they massage the data, they can present a sanitized, artificially low number to the press. But Wall Street knows the truth. The reason the stock market hits record high after record high is not because the underlying economy is fundamentally strong. It is because the currency is being debased. Asset prices are inflating because the value of the dollar is falling. The billionaires and corporate elites who own real estate, equities, and hard assets see their net worth skyrocket. They are protected. Meanwhile, the working class, who hold their wealth in cash and rely on fixed wages, are crushed. This is why you see a complete disconnect between the triumphant speeches in Washington and the despair in local communities. Telling a mother who cannot afford baby formula or a worker paying $5 for gas that there is no inflation is the ultimate form of economic gaslighting. It is designed to make you question your own reality. But do not let them break your perception. The math does not lie, and the promised relief they are dangling in front of you is just another illusion, as we will uncover in the next segment. To pacify an angry and financially exhausted population, the political class always turns to their favorite parlor trick: the promise of historic tax cuts and massive refunds. We heard it in the broadcast. The promise of bringing income taxes down to levels never seen before. It sounds like salvation, but let us run the actual numbers through the lens of objective financial analysis. Suppose the government does grant you a tax cut that puts an extra $2,000 back into your pocket this year. On the surface, it feels like a win. But you have to look at the other side of the ledger. Over the last few years, the cumulative compounded rate of real-world inflation on essential goods has been staggering. If your annual expenses for housing, food, electricity, and transportation have gone up by $6,000 due to the debasement of the currency we discussed earlier, that $2,000 tax cut is completely meaningless. You are still $4,000 in the hole. The tax cut is nothing more than a mirage. It is a psychological tool used to manufacture consent and keep the public compliant. Furthermore, if the government cuts revenue through tax reductions but continues to spend trillions on defense operations and global interventions, the national deficit explodes even faster. How do they cover that expanding gap? They print more money, which causes more inflation. The very tax cut they give you with their left hand forces them to use their right hand to steal even more of your purchasing power through inflation. It is an endless doom loop of fiscal irresponsibility. They are essentially bribing you with your own money, but returning it to you in a currency that is worth significantly less. The media will praise the tax relief, but financial analysts at institutions like Reuters and the Wall Street Journal understand the grim reality. You cannot cut taxes without cutting spending unless you are willing to destroy the currency. And as we will analyze in the next block, our adversaries understand this mathematical vulnerability perfectly. They are not trying to defeat our military, they are trying to bankrupt our treasury. We must shift our perspective from the traditional view of warfare to the modern reality of geopolitical economics. The narrative pushed by the establishment focuses entirely on technological superiority and firepower. We boast about having the most advanced aircraft, the most lethal drones, and an unstoppable navy. But this mindset is a relic of the 20th century. The adversaries of the United States in the Middle East and elsewhere are not playing a game of military domination. They are playing a game of asymmetric financial exhaustion. Think about the basic economics of modern conflict. When a hostile group launches a crude, mass-produced drone that costs perhaps $20,000 to build, how does the United States respond? We track it with multi-billion-dollar radar systems and shoot it down with a highly sophisticated interceptor missile that costs $2 million. From a military standpoint, the interception is a success. The target is destroyed. But from a financial standpoint, it is a catastrophic loss. We just spent $2 million to destroy a $20,000 piece of flying plastic. If the enemy launches 100 of those cheap drones, they have spent $2 million, while we have just burned through $200 million of taxpayer wealth. This is the definition of asymmetric warfare. The goal of the opposition is not to win a set-piece battle. Their goal is to keep the region completely unstable, forcing the United States to deploy carrier strike groups, fly endless sorties, and fire expensive munitions day after day, month after month. They are trying to bleed the American empire dry financially. Every missile fired is more national debt. Every deployment is more inflation. Our adversaries understand the game theory of this conflict better than our own politicians do. They know that no empire in human history has ever been defeated strictly from the outside. Empires collapse from within when their currency fails and their citizens can no longer afford to live. This strategy of financial attrition is directly tied to the most dangerous geopolitical shift of our lifetime, which is unfolding right now on the global stage. While the public is distracted by the spectacle of military operations and political speeches, a much larger and far more dangerous movement is quietly accelerating in the background. By aggressively weaponizing the global financial system and utilizing military force to secure assets like the Venezuelan oil fields, the United States is sending a chilling message to the rest of the world. That message is simple. If you do not align with Washington, your sovereign assets are not safe and your economy can be crushed. The nations of the world, particularly the BRICS alliance comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are watching very closely. They see the sanctions, they see the asset freezes, and they are making a rational, calculated decision to protect themselves. They are accelerating the process of de-dollarization. For decades, the foundation of American economic supremacy has been the petrodollar system. Countries around the world needed United States dollars to buy oil. This created a massive, constant global demand for our currency, which allowed our government to print trillions of dollars without causing immediate hyperinflation at home. We exported our inflation to the rest of the globe, but that era is ending. Major energy producers and consumers are increasingly bypassing the dollar, settling trade in local currencies or gold. If the world stops using the dollar to trade oil, the artificial demand for our currency evaporates. All those trillions of dollars currently circulating overseas will eventually come flooding back to American shores. When that happens, the inflation we are experiencing now will look like a mild inconvenience. The price of imported goods will skyrocket, the cost of living will become unmanageable for the average family. The seizure of oil fields and the projection of military power might look like strength in the short term, but it is acting as a catalyst for the ultimate destruction of the dollar's reserve status. This is the great macroeconomic shift that the mainstream media refuses to cover. But the smartest investors in the world are already preparing for it, leading us to the massive wealth transfer happening behind closed doors. If the middle class is being crushed by inflation and the national debt is spiraling out of control, you have to ask yourself, who is actually winning? Follow the money. In times of geopolitical crisis and engineered inflation, wealth is not destroyed. It is simply transferred. We are living through one of the largest upward transfers of wealth in modern history. The smart money on Wall Street, the institutional investors, and the political elite do not keep their wealth in cash. They understand that the currency is structurally designed to lose value. So, what do? They position their portfolios to profit from the chaos. When the government announces multi-billion-dollar defense packages and endless military operations, the stock prices of the major defense contractors surge. When global supply chains are disrupted and energy markets are thrown into turmoil, the profit margins of multinational energy corporations explode. The elites buy equity in these sectors. They receive massive dividend payouts. They use cheap borrowed money to buy up real estate and hard assets, knowing that inflation will wipe away the real value of their debt while pushing the value of their assets higher. Meanwhile, the average citizen is told to put their money in a savings account, yielding almost nothing, while the true rate of inflation eats away their purchasing power by 10 or 15% a year. The political class uses speeches about patriotism, victory, and economic miracles to keep the public calm and compliant while the structural looting takes place. It is a rigged game where the rules are written by those closest to the money printer. The gap between the ultra-wealthy and the working class is not an accident. It is the mathematical certainty of a fiat currency system combined with endless geopolitical intervention. The middle class is funding the empire, and the elites are collecting the dividends. But you do not have to be a victim of this system. Knowledge is the ultimate defense, which brings us to our final analysis. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, peeling back the layers of deception surrounding the 2026 energy narrative and the illusion of a zero-inflation economy. We have seen how securing global oil reserves does not equal cheap domestic gas. We have exposed the shadow tax of money printing that funds foreign conflicts while impoverishing citizens at home. And we have analyzed the dangerous game theory of asymmetric warfare and global de-dollarization. The reality we face is stark. The political establishment will continue to gaslight the public. They will continue to manipulate the data to hide the true rate of inflation, and they will continue to prioritize global hegemony and corporate profits over the financial well-being of the American middle class. You cannot vote away mathematical realities, and you cannot expect the architects of this system to suddenly change their behavior. So, what is your protocol? First, you must protect your perception. Stop consuming mainstream media narratives that tell you everything is fine while your own lived experience tells you otherwise. Trust your wallet, not their statistics. Second, you must begin thinking like the smart money. In a world of infinite currency creation, holding your wealth purely in fiat cash is a guaranteed loss. You need to educate yourself on hard assets, commodities, and investments that are immune to the printing press. Protect your purchasing power with the same intensity that they are trying to steal it. Here at Prism News, our mission is to provide you with the unfiltered geopolitical and macroeconomic insights you need to navigate this engineered chaos. If this investigation brought you value and helped clarify the reality behind the headlines, hit the subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth about where their money is really going. And finally, drop a comment below. What steps are you taking to protect your family from the inflation shadow tax? I read every single one of your insights. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay critical, and never stop questioning the narrative. This is Prism News, signing off.